Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to explore how modern scientific analysis acts as the ultimate key to cracking some of the most legendary historical cold cases out there. We've all heard tales of mysteries that just seemed destined to remain unsolved forever, right? Baffling experts and armchair detectives for generations. But as technology and our analytical methods evolve, that fog of history actually begins to lift, allowing us to finally see the truth hiding beneath the surface.
Just think about it. What do the ghost ship, the Mary Celeste, and the enigmatic Somerton man actually have in common? Well, they both seem totally impossible to solve until science stepped in. For over a century, the Mary Celeste was a complete riddle. That is, until Dr. Andriasella built a physical replica of the ship's hold. Using butane gas, he proved that a simulated explosion caused by alcohol leaking from the cargo was the culprit. And the Somerton man? Modern analysis revealed him to simply be a poetry-writing loner. Science, time and time again, proves it can absolutely solve the unsolvable.
Section 1. The Voynich Manuscript.
And that brings us to our primary suspect for this explainer. This is a case that makes those other mysteries look like absolute child's play. We are talking about a 15th century codex known as the Voynich Manuscript. This thing has literally defied the greatest cryptographers, linguists, and historians in the world. Get this. Over half of this 232-page manuscript is dedicated to bizarre botanical drawings. But if you look closely at the roots and the leaves, they're biologically impossible. They're entirely unidentifiable plants. It instantly immerses you in the sheer weirdness of this text. Honestly, it feels like a botany textbook from another dimension.
As we flip through the pages, those bizarre plants give way to incredibly complex, completely unidentifiable astrology charts. You've got these strange astral diagrams, a zodiac, and what scholars call the balneological pages. And these feature, incredibly strange illustrations of naked women bathing in pools of green water.
And then you have these pages of completely unillustrated text, cleanly demarcated by little red stars. You can see this strange, beautifully fluid script written out in traditional iron gall ink on vellum. It looks like it should be perfectly readable, right? Yet this exact script has completely defied decipherment for centuries.
Which brings us to the core conflict we're unpacking today. Is this a real, natural language just hiding in plain sight, maybe protected by a super complex cipher? Or did some medieval hoaxer spend a massive fortune on high-quality vellum, which was an incredibly expensive material back then, by the way, just to write hundreds of pages of elaborate gibberish to trick a rich buyer?
Section 2, the interrogation, science versus gibberish. To answer that, we're basically putting the text on the stand. We're using forensic linguistics to act as our ultimate lie detector test. So first, let's look at the script itself. Now, there are a few very rare instances of recognizable writing in the book, like a partially obscured phrase in Latin script or some Occitan month names. But the vast, vast majority of those 116 folios are written in a completely unique orthography that linguists have simply dubbed Voynichese. And this perfectly illustrates a really fascinating clue. Notice how some of these mysterious Voynichese characters, specifically the ones researchers call gallows and bench characters, look suspiciously similar to standard abbreviation marks used by everyday medieval scribes in Latin manuscripts. It heavily suggests we're dealing with a scribe who is deeply familiar with the writing conventions of that time period. Okay, let's dive into the heavy science to really test this text. Linguists actually applied what's known as the Suketin algorithm to Voynichese. Basically, this is a computational method that identifies vowels, working on the premise that vowels most frequently sit right next to consonants. And guess what? When you run this algorithm on the Voynich text, it successfully isolates 4 distinct vowels and a set of consonants. It behaves exactly like a natural language would.
But the plot thickens with this next metric. Let me introduce you to something called conditional character entropy, or H2. This measures the overall predictability of a letter given the preceding letter in a word. Think about the English language for a second. If you see the letter Q, you can guarantee with near total certainty that the very next letter is going to be U. That is low entropy. It's highly predictable.
So, when mapped out, the Voynich samples sit completely separated from the natural languages clustered around them. Voynichese actually has unusually low conditional entropy. The character sequences within the words are incredibly predictable, like much more predictable than standard European languages. Certain characters only ever appear at the beginning of words, while others only show up at the very end.
Now, you might be wondering, if the letters are that predictable, maybe it is a hoax. Maybe it's just naive gibberish. Well, enter Zipf's law.
This is a statistical power law stating that the frequency of any word is inversely proportional to its rank in a frequency table. Look, this is the ultimate undeniable test for a natural language. It's literally a mathematical fingerprint of human communication, and it would be practically impossible for a 15th century human to just manually fake this across tens of thousands of words.
And when plotted out, the data representing the Voynich text perfectly hugs the Zipf curve, right alongside real languages like Occitan, Arabic, and Turkish. The word distribution perfectly mimics natural languages. It completely destroys the theory that the book is just random gibberish. I mean, you simply cannot fake a Zipfian distribution by just making up words off the top of your head.
Section 3. Debunking the decipherment theories. So, if the science is telling us it's a real language, the big question is, which one? Over the decades, a lot of experts have jumped to conclusions, chasing false leads. We've seen claims that it's abbreviated Latin shorthand, an anagrammed version of Hebrew, or even Mesoamerican Nahuatl. And some of these researchers have generated massive media attention with these claims. But here's the fatal flaw for literally all of them. None of these decipherments have actually produced a single grammatically correct or semantically consistent sentence. They focus entirely on matching a few words and completely ignore the syntax.
Let's look closely at the Mesoamerican Nahuatl theory as a prime example of why getting your timeline straight absolutely matters. Proponents of this theory claim the plants drawn in the book are from Mexico, native to the 1550s. But the undeniable science of carbon dating proves that's a physical impossibility. The vellum of the codex dates precisely between 1404 and 1438. The timeline just doesn't add up. It is physically impossible for a book created in the early 1400s to chronicle Mexican flora that wouldn't be discovered by Europeans for over a century.
Furthermore, when we measure lexical diversity using something called the Moving Average Type Token Ratio, or MATTR, Voynich's perfectly aligns with the morphological complexity of Romance, Germanic, and Iranian language families. It sits right in that sweet spot of medium morphological complexity.
And this is reinforced by tracking the proportional frequency of the top 10 most frequent words. The data point for Voynich lands totally within the normal range for natural languages. In a typical language, the most common words, words like the, and, or in, they take up about 15% of a text. Voynich A sits at 15.7% and Voynich B at 14.5%. This brilliantly confirms it's a medium complexity, highly structured language.
Section 4. The mystery remains.
So we can summarize with absolute statistical certainty that the Voynich manuscript is not a hoax. The math proves it is a real, highly structured, natural language. But if it's not gibberish, and it's not any of the hundreds of languages we have rigorously tested it against, what exactly is it hiding? Whoever encoded the world's most mysterious book created a cipher so genius that even our most advanced modern supercomputers can only prove that it's talking but still cannot tell us what it is actually saying. So, I have to ask you, what secrets do you think are